Lord's bright morning star. And throughout eternity, I'll sing his praises, and I'll reign with him throughout eternity. All hail King Jesus, all hail Emmanuel, King of kings, Lord of lords, bright morning star. And throughout eternity, I'll sing his praises, and I'll reign with him throughout eternity. Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Yes, where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my songs to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Beautiful singing. Maybe see.
or what the Lord wanted me to say. And so here I am in Mark 5. Before we get into that, let me tell you the title of my lesson. I really never could come up with a title. And then I came up with two things. So I'm going to use both of these as titles. They're really the same thing. Stop fearing and keep believing. Now I'm going to tell you, I was born in Kentucky. I went to Germany when I was younger. I came back, and I've been in Louisiana since 1964. Fort Polk, that's where I was raised at. So sometimes my English vernacular might get off just a little bit. So I apologize for that in advance as well. Stop fearing and keep believing. The other title I was looking at, The Faith of Jesus Never Fails. So I wanted to use both of them because that's going to be the title of what my lesson is going to be about tonight. We're going to look tonight at fear. Do you have any fears? You know, if one thing, I got to be careful the way I say this. If there's one thing that caused me to really start looking at fear, was COVID. I'm going to tell you from my perspective. I had just retired from my job with the school system when COVID came about. And no one really knew what it was, and I'm not telling you guys anything new. No one really knew what it was. They were doing all kinds of things, whether you agree with it or not. That's all under the bridge now. We're beyond that. But I can tell you, that brought a lot of fear to a lot of people. A lot of fear. And I'm going to tell you from my perspective, brought fear to me because I was in charge of protecting my family. And so as a result, people didn't come visit our house. You know, there was none of that. But I look back on one of the things that really, as I look back, it upset me to no end. There were many people that were in nursing homes, elderly, that never had the opportunity to have visitation anymore because they were stopping all that. You remember that. They would be able to go to the windows and speak to them. These people in the last bits of their life were dying lonely. And it really came to grips with me with my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law's mother was going through some very, very difficult times with diabetes, and she started going through her last stages of diabetes. They put her in a nursing home, basically as a rehab place. She got worse. They ended up putting her in a hospital. And I remember my sister-in-law crying because she couldn't go visit her mother. And at that time, they knew she was dying. They did let her dad go, but he had to stay there. He couldn't go in and out. He had to stay there, which was a surprise to them because they didn't expect it to happen, that he was going to be able to do there. But those kind of fears that we faced during that time, fear for our family, I'll confess, I went to Walmart because I wouldn't let my wife go. And when I got home from Walmart, I listened to what everybody else said. Make sure you wear gloves when you bring your bags in, kind of Lysol them. And remember that? We did all that stuff. That's fear. That's fear. You know, there were people that had fear about dying. There were fears about their family. There were fears about their income. There were fears about spreading the diseases. There were economic concerns. Fear. Fears of the devil. So what are you afraid of? You know, I've come to realize that I'm afraid of a couple of things. I did extensive research, which means I Googled for about 20 seconds. And I came up with America's Greatest Fears. You know, I remember that, what was that movie or show they had on? Fear Factor, you know, and I remember I watched it one time, and that's all I needed of that. But I watched them put a lady into this like coffin thing where only her face was out of it, and then they had all these bugs crawling all over. You know, that's all I needed of that. There were a lot of other things there too, and I don't think that stayed on too long, but I remember that Fear Factor. That's crazy. So anyway, I Googled this, and I came up with this, and I wanted to bring it up tonight because I thought it was kind of funny. America's biggest fears, top 10 phobias. Of course, you know phobias, an extreme fear of something, whatever. I'm going to ask you if you know what this is. Astrophobia. Fear of thunder and lightning. You're close. This is an interesting one I did not know. Ophidiophobia. Snakes. Agoraphobia. Public spaces and crowds. Very good. Very good. Now, that's not me. Because I know I meet everybody and they're friends with me, and my wife just hates going anywhere with me because I'm going to stop people in the mall or I'm going to stop people at Walmart, and I'm going to talk to them about, how's your mother and them? I'm going to do that. That's the way I am. She hates it. She wants to get in and go out. So you know what the rule is now? You go to Walmart, I'm not going. But that's okay. I'm all right with that. Arachnophobia, everybody knows what that is. Spiders. My little grandson, he just finished swimming lessons. I took him to swimming lessons every day. And the reason we took him to swimming lessons because he's one of those, those little boys that's not afraid of anything? Well, that's him. So we were afraid that he was going to get around some water or whatever. And so we got him swimming lessons. He was remarkable. The teacher says, he's swimming like a fish. And he was doing real well. The last day, I'm not all upset about this, but he got into a little troubling situation. Not too bad, but the teacher was right there and grabbed him. And afterwards, I said, well, how was swimming lessons? He said, it was great, Papa, it was great, except for one thing. And I said, what? Because I was expecting him to say, when I was struggling there, I saw a spider. And that's what shut him down. He didn't want to go swimming anymore after that. The spider that was in the pool. Isn't that interesting? So he's definitely afraid of spiders. I got another one. Acrophobia. Fear of heights. Trypanophobia. Injections. People that go to give blood and stuff like that, they go freaked out over that. Social phobia, obviously social interactions. Mysophobia. Germs, dirt, and other things. Those people that are germophobic kind of type people? And here's the two that are on this list that are my biggest fears. And I'm opening myself up to you. Aerophobia. The fear of flying. Let me tell you, I've had to fly over the course of my time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to fly in 2 weeks to Detroit. Before that plane takes off, I'm saying a prayer. When that dude gets up in the air, I say, thank you, Lord, and I'm saying another prayer. And when that thing starts going down, I say a third prayer. Always. Always. Because I have that fear. Oh, come on, Rick. I've heard this, Are you kidding me? There's more chance of you dying in an auto accident than there is a plane crash. Yeah, Bull, I'm in the plane right now. That's kind of the way I feel about it. That's still not my biggest fear. Maybe it is one of my biggest fears, but it's not my biggest fear. My biggest fear is cynophobia. The fear of dogs. Yes. Let me tell you, when I was a little child, for whatever reason, I'm walking down the street, big old German Shepherd chased me down this street and bit me right in the back. From that day on, I've always been afraid of dogs. Now, that doesn't mean I won't go around dogs. That doesn't mean my wife won't have dogs. We've had them. But I'm afraid of dogs. Let me give you an example. I used to walk in my neighborhood, and I don't know, some of you may know where I live, some of you don't. I live over there on Pleasant Ridge in that area. I walk around Pleasant Ridge. I used to. Then there started some roaming dogs around there. All right. Big, ferocious. I mean, they'll tear your head off. Those chihuahua-looking things. Then I had to start carrying this big stick. Kind of like what Brother David's got right here. One of those big Moses coming down stick and carrying that. Well, that got cumbersome. And let me tell you, when I walk, you can tell, it takes a lot. And I don't need to carry any other luggage if I don't have to. So I started going to the park. Well, guess what? They bring dogs. They even have one of those little dog yards they'll let them run in. So I'm thinking, well, at least they got leash laws. So if they're not in that little yard, they're going to, you have to be on a leash and all that stuff. So I'm okay with that, right? Well, today, guess what happened? I start walking around that corner, and this guy's coming out of that little shed or that little area with his dog, and he's got a big dog. I'm talking huge. And I start turning that corner to head that way. I'm still about a quarter of a mile maybe, not even maybe that far, but maybe something like that. And I see him trying to hold that chain with that big old dog, and he fell. And that dog was pulling him. I felt bad for him, but I turned the other way. And I walked away because that dog was huge. Anyway, so I walked the other way. I came around the other side. Well, guess what? There's another dog. I walked as far off to the side as I could and let him pass. The lady had him on the chain and did pretty good. That Chihuahua just scared the heck out of me, though. So I don't like dogs. Dogs frighten me. So I have fears. Today, all silliness aside, we're going to look at a lady that also had some fears. Some of you are familiar with this story. I know many of you are. And you've come across this before, this story. I'd like to read through these verses real quick, and then I'll come back and talk about them. So let's go ahead and start reading. In Mark chapter 5, verse 21. When Jesus had crossed over again by the boat, he had been across the Sea of Galilee to another town to go preaching. And for those of you that remember, he wasn't really able to preach. He came across the demon-possessed guy, chased the demons out of him, threw them into the pigs. Remember that? And then the pigs run off into the water, drowned and all that. And so he was still going on into the city to preach. And the people said, no, 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 no. They wanted him gone. Remember that? So they said, no, don't come here. You done took away our livelihood. You got rid of these pigs. The bacon's gone. We don't want any more of you here. And they chased him off, so he went back across the Sea of Galilee. And this is where we're at here. When Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him. One of the things about Jesus, he's going to attract people, right? A large crowd was around him while he was by the sea. Verse 22, one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, my little daughter is dying. Come and lay your hands on her so that she can get well and live. So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd was following and pressing against him. Now a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years had endured much under many doctors. She had spent everything she had and was not helped at all. On the contrary, she became worse. Having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothing. For she said, if I just touch his clothes, I will be made well. Instantly, notice that word. We'll come back to it. Instantly, her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body that she was healed of her affliction. At once, Jesus realized in himself that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and he said, who touched my clothes? His disciples said to him, I'm going to say it like this. Are you kidding me? His disciples said to him, you see the crowd that is pressing against you? And you know who that was? Tigger. That was Peter. And yet you say, who touched me? But he was looking around to see who had done this. The woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Daughter, he said to her, your, what's the word? Faith. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction. Man, what a powerful story. You've all seen this. You've all heard this. You've all been a part of this or heard somebody preach about it. teaching in the Sunday school class, whatever it is, and I'm going to throw a little plug. If you want to come to Sunday school and you're not plugged in somewhere, come to my class. We have fun, and we learn about Jesus. So anyway, let's get back to our verses. That's my little plug. Here Jesus was coming back. He's demonstrating power. He demonstrated power over the demons. He's getting ready to demonstrate power over illness with this lady, and Jairus' daughter, power over death. He's demonstrating his power. He's on his mission to find more and more people, talk to more and more people. So he just crossed over the Sea of Galilee because they had run him off. He'd come back. He was going to continue to preach. The crowd gathered there. Why did a crowd gather? Why did a crowd gather? They had been hearing about Jesus. They had been seeing about Jesus. And they wanted to be around him because excitement was there, right? They wanted to know more. They wanted to be there. They wanted to witness these miracles they'd been hearing about. So they were thronging about him. Tons of people it's hard for him to walk. It's hard for anybody to get close to him. That's how many people they were. Just thronged around him. They were gathered around him. They wanted to be there. They wanted to see him. They wanted to know what he was doing. Came up to him and said, what? Hey, man, my daughter's ill. She's on her deathbed. Come and save her. Now, don't you find that kind of interesting? What were the Pharisees trying to do at that time? They were trying to investigate Jesus, look for any way they could do to kill him. But here you have a leader in the church at the synagogue that comes to him and said, hey, evidently he had either witnessed it, he had probably heard him preach in the synagogue, he had probably heard people saying, hey, this is what Jesus can do for you. Do you think he was desperate? How old was his daughter? 12 years old. He had been experiencing 12 years of utter joy with a child. Now, is 12 years a long time? In my spectrum, probably not. You know? But when I was in school, first grade to the 12th grade, seemed like an eternity. 12 years. He had experienced joy with this child. And you all, as parents, also understand that same impact with your children. But he knew she was dying. He went to who? Jesus. Because he had heard. Did he have faith? Believe so. We're not going to get into that story very long, but we do know that he eventually brings that child back to life. Because our story today is about this woman. Go down to verse 24. So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd was following, pressing against him. Again, that's because they wanted to be by him. They wanted to see him in action. They wanted to see these miracles. And look at verse 25. Now a woman suffering. It doesn't say a woman that had this disease. It said a woman suffering. Now, you don't want to know how she was suffering? Now, think about this. Now, here's the opposite end of that 12 years. She had been 12 years with this blood disease. Losing blood. Well, I know when Rick yesterday went to give blood, I was shot the rest of the day. And she'd been losing blood for 12 years. Can you imagine how weak she was? Think about this for just a minute. 4,380 days. 4,380 days she was losing blood. Can you imagine the physical fatigue and everything that her body went through? And do you think that might have played on her mind as well? Just the mental, emotional tax that was on her body. You know, blood is iron rich, carries oxygen to the cells. It's needed to be able to survive and to live. Her body was continually losing it. Iron poor blood. I've heard that when I was little. Iron poor blood. Verse 26. She had endured much. Well, wait a minute, Rick. You've already talked about her physical and emotional taxing of the body. What do you mean she endured much? How do you think that endured much? Well, we're getting ready to read. She had endured much under many doctors. Well, she went to the doctors. I believe, just Rick's opinion here, if she's like my wife, well, she didn't have Google, but my wife be on that medical Google all the time. But also, she's going to call her sister. And then she's going to call her mama. And then she's going to call her best friend. And anyone that she knows that might have related to this kind of issue. So I think this lady probably did the same thing. I think she taxed everybody she knew to try to be healed. And if you think about it, 12 years she was like this, don't you think she would exhaust all resources? Everybody. Not only everybody, look at this. She had spent everything that she had. Everything that she had. And was not helped. She went to everybody, every resource she might have. She spent every little bit of money that she had. No good. Do you think that played on her mentally and emotionally? Man. But look at this last statement. On the contrary, she became worse. Boy, isn't that like us? Isn't that like us? We have a problem at our work. We start looking for ways to correct it. Going to other workers, going to our boss, going to other avenues, anything. We have trouble with our kids. We call other parents. We call our parents. We might even talk to the pastor. We talk to the youth director. We talk to all these other resources. We have problems with anything. We're always looking for other solutions. You know who's got the answer? Jesus. And she's getting ready to find that out. You know, she was frustrated. She became worse. You know that frustration hit her. She was poor. She spent everything she had on trying to be healed. And the doctors took everything she had from her. And finally, when there was nothing they could do, basically she was considered incurable. 12 years, I could see that. But you know, one of the things that really played on her? She was isolated. Well, what do you mean, Rick? How was she isolated? Because of Jewish law? Let me read something out of Leviticus to you. I'm not going to read all of it because some of it's pretty graphic, but I'm going to read 15 out of Leviticus 15, 25 through 27. When a woman has a discharge of her blood for many days, though it is not the time of her menstruation, or if she has a discharge beyond her period, she will be unclean all the days of her unclean discharge. She had had discharge for 12 years. So she was considered what? Unclean. And at the end of this, verse 27, everyone who touches them will be unclean. Everyone. She was Jewish. So how about her family? Hey, come on over. Well, I'm sorry, wait a minute. You're going to have to stay at home. We'll send dinner to you. Walking down the street. Walking down the street. If she's walking down the street, people would see her go to the other side of the road and walk by. There was no touch. Completely abandoned her. Think how lonely she was. Tormented in her own mind. Do you think desperate? Yeah. She was excluded from church, from family, from work, from school, from a store, from everything. Excluded. What a horrible existence. It's classified as untouchable. You know, about 3 years ago, I guess, I thought maybe we were living in the Jewish law. I'm throwing a barb. I apologize. Verse 27. Look at this first part of this. Having, what's that word? Heard about Jesus. Having heard about Jesus. It didn't say she saw. said, after having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in a crowd and touched his clothes. That's important to you and me. Because we need to also be telling about Jesus to everyone we see. Everybody. We need to be telling them about Jesus. Because when they hear about Jesus, they may not turn and convert right then, turn their life over to God. They may. But somewhere down the road, like this, when they're untouchable, when they need somebody, they're at the end of their ropes, she knew that if she touched anyone, they were going to political law. She still and went through a crowd to get to Jesus. Not only did she have faith based on her hearing, but her actions represented that faith. She desperately wanted to be healed. Jesus was on his way to help Jairus' daughter and raise her back, as we know, from death. But he was interrupted in the middle of this crowd on his way. Do you think he ignored it? He stopped immediately. He stopped. He wants us to interrupt with our problems, just like she did. How did she hear that? I always wondered, how did she hear that? I read this in Matthew, and I said, well, I'm going to say this because I read this out of Matthew. It said, when they came to shore at Gennesaret, when the men of the place recognized him, they alerted the whole vicinity and brought to him all who were sick. That's the impact Jesus had. They begged him to touch the end of the robe, and as many as touched it were healed. It was spread. The people spread it. She heard. We need to make sure as a church that we continue to let people know about this. The more we talk, the more have the opportunity to have their. Verse 28, she said, if I could just touch his clothes, I would be made well. Now, is that a powerful demonstration of faith? If I could just touch his clothes. The hem of his gown, his kanaf, clothes in the original language. Look at verse 29, and I said, watch this word. Instantly, her flow of blood ceased. Not a week later, not a month later, instantly, her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body that she was healed of her affliction. When you adjust what you do, God, to Jesus, he's going to take care of you. Just like her. She was an outcast. She was not supposed to go around anybody. Didn't went through the whole crowd, touched Jesus' hem. Because she knew, she thought, Jesus has been touching all these people, they'd be healed. Well, if I could just touch him, or it's the hem of his garment. That's how much faith she had. Now look at verse 30, because I find this interesting. Immediately, Jesus realized that power had gone. He felt that power go out of him. Wait a minute. He was in a crowd. How about all those other people that were touching him? How about all those other people that were touching him? No power? No faith. They were just a crowd there to see what was going on. There to see him perform. That same kind of faith she had. Power had gone out of him. He turned around the crowd and he said, "Who touched my clothes? Who touched my clothes?" Now, how do you think his disciples responded to that? Because he's got people just God. Me of going through elementary school. When I was superintendent, I used to try to go to all the schools. I'd go through an elementary school. If I recall going down the hallway or something where they weren't in a classroom, they all want to come hug you. I mean, it's just all around you. You know, I'm okay with the hug and stuff, I guess. But, you know, like, okay, yeah. But, you know, then I look at my pants, they got marks all over them. But that's they were all around Jesus. So the disciples are sitting there looking at each other. I love this here. In Luke, this same story, it says that Peter responded to this question. Peter, you know, Tigger? Peter said, "Master, crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you. It's everybody." That's kind of what he said. Everybody, I added. That's Tigger, right? Responding without thinking. Jesus knew the answer. He wasn't asking Peter the answer. He was wanting that forward. He was wanting that person to come forward. You know, it's virtually impossible to get next to Jesus. And we're like, really? We don't know. But you know, that crowd he had went through, the differences in the touches that were on him. And touched the body at all, just his clothes. And he felt it. He felt the power leaving. He recognized the difference between the power leaving him and just people touching him. It's only through faith that God releases that. Not curiosity, which everyone else was exhibiting. Look at verse 32. But he was looking around to see who had done this. Do you think he knew? He knew. But he was looking around because he had asked the question to see who would come. 33. The woman, in fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, she knew she was healed, came and fell before Jesus, fell before him, and told him. My Bible says the whole truth. But she told him everything. Jesus, for 12 years, I've had this bleeding issue. For 12 years, I've went to everyone I know and paid all my money. I have no money to all these doctors. I have been walking down the street, people go the other way. I don't get invited to the family. I have to avoid my family. I have to avoid everything. I can't go to the synagogue, can't go to church, can't go to crowds, can't go anywhere. She told him everything. And you know, she demonstrated fear. Because it says that. She was with fear and trembling. She was afraid. She was afraid that Jesus might rebuke her, say, "Get away from me, you're unclean." Or the crowd would rebuke her, "Get away from Jesus, you're unclean." Think about the fear she had, and she had to fight through, because of her faith, to touch Jesus. Faith will replace fear, but you got to fight through it. Doesn't mean fear is going to go away. But you gotta fight through it. This woman fought through her fear. Jesus asked the question. He knows all things. She walked forward and told him her story. Because of her faith, she fought that fear. And verse 34, he says, "Daughter." I've heard this, and I'm not sure. I didn't check on this for sure, so don't hold me to this. That's the only time he's mentioned daughter in the Bible. I'd heard that. Again, that's hearsay. He said to her, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." Wow. Isn't that a wonderful miracle? Isn't that a wonderful attribute of God's love for us and for this woman? You know, we all love them miracles, don't we? But we sure don't like the mess that goes before the miracle, because she was dealing with a mess. You know, and we deal with messes all the time. Why? Because we live in this broken world. Well, let me tell you, with your faith, you can overcome all the obstacles you face, whether it's obstacles of fear, whether it's poorness, because we all worry about those type things, our health, our family's health, our kids, making sure or hoping that they become saved if they're unsaved, family members, all kinds of things we're continuously grieving over or worrying about or have fears about. But this is my last thing that I want to read to you. And you can look at it, verse 36. I skipped to verse 36 because this, well, let me go to 35 because you need to understand the context. While he was still speaking, people came forward from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore? Leave him alone. Your daughter's dead. He can't come there to help her anymore." But look what Jesus says, because this is Jesus' answer to our fears. 36, when Jesus overheard what was said, he told the synagogue leader, "Look here, don't be afraid." Don't fear. What's the next thing? Believe. Have faith. Jesus gives us the answer to fear. Believe. Don't be afraid. I guess I'll go back to the park tomorrow to walk with the dogs. So our passage today provides us hope and encouragement, even when we're faced with everything that we're faced with in this world today. It doesn't seem like it's getting better. You know, we keep calling on Jesus to continue to help our country or to take us home. And you know, the reality is, God knows best. God knows best. He's going to do in his time what is best and what is the plan, regardless of what we hope for or want. I'm going to leave you with the last statement. Faith isn't the absence of fear. Faith is trusting in God in the face of fear. In the face of fear, trust God. That's all I've got. Anyone want to add anything? I always let people add anything they want. All right, again, I'm going to give you a plug for my Sunday school class. If you don't have anywhere plugged in, come plug in with us. You'll enjoy it. Jimmy, would you close in prayer, please, sir?